Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic on Totem Pole Sports. And we're here today to talk about my brother, my friend, Coach Jimmie Rogers, Ranger Rogers. And we have some guests on right now. We're going to have some more people coming and going, as this time goes on. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, you can leave comments, ask questions. We might even get you to jump on the podcast. But just to introduce everybody, first, Mary Sargent. Mary was very influential in the youth football programs that fed into Meadowbrook, where Jimmie coached. And she went to high school with Jimmie Rogers. So we're glad to have her. And she's going to be an expert on Jimmie's pretty much whole life. next to Mary, we have Larry Rogers, who is the brother of Jimmie Rogers. And I met Larry first when he was coaching basketball for Bensley. Underneath Larry Rogers is probably one of my favorite players I've ever coached. And he was like a son to me before my own son. I'm getting emotional now just thinking about John because I love so much. John, this interview was supposed to be about John Graves and about lifting weights in a high school football program. But I thought about it, and we had done one of these for Coach McPhee, and we did one for Coach Chilcote this morning. And I asked John, I said, could we do this about Jimmie? And John, the type of guy he is, and he was a state champion football player at Meadowbrook and went to Virginia Tech, and he was captain there with Tyrod Taylor. And then he went to the NFL and played with the Saints and with the Texans. I mean, the Seahawks and the Texans. And now, he's a strength coach at Mississippi State. And, that's just the type of guy John is. And then next to John is Kenny Mistack Connor, who was a teammate of Johnny, graduated the year before. He's one of the smartest football players that I've ever coached. And he's one of the toughest. And he's from Bensley. And, he knew Jimmie back when Jimmie was coaching for Bensley. I think everybody did. So I appreciate
One way or another, you knew who he was.
Huh?
One way or another, you knew who he was.
Everybody knew Ranger Rogers. So, Larry, I guess I'll start off with you because, you're Jimmie's brother. Tell us a little bit about Jimmie for everybody that's watching out there today or is going to watch in the future.
Well, Jimmie was my big brother, and he was my hero. I can remember going to games at Meadowbrook as an 8-year-old, and Jimmie would let me carry his football helmet, and that was the coolest thing for me. Jimmie always had my back. Nobody messed with his mama, and I mean, Jimmie loved family. Jimmie was a guy to where if he was in your foxhole, Jimmie had you 100%. He was a great guy, and as a family member, it's something every day that we keep dealing with, He was that important to us.
I mean, what a loss losing Jimmie Rogers, but we're just so blessed to have him for the time that we did. And Donald Sargent, Mary's son, has left a comment on YouTube. He said, "Good to see your face, John Graves." Donald, if you want to get on, your mom will send you the link. But, Jimmie had a lot of different jobs, but at one time he worked at Dillard's and he ran the shoe department. And Ms. Sargent, would you like to tell a story about Jimmie and how he had Donald working for him, and he had
the whole football team worked for him. I walked into Dillard's one day, and there's John Graves and Donald and the little guy, I can't remember his name. Dwayne Kelly, and there's a whole bunch of them. And I'm looking around going, Jimmie, I think you've hired all of Meadowbrook. He goes, I've hired everyone that's applied. And he definitely took them boys up under his wings, and and taught them how to do business. He, give them incentives, sell so many shoes and you'll get this or do this. And when they returned, these high dollar purses, the coaches and the Agner and all that kind of stuff, he said they would have to throw them away. Yeah. So he saved up about 20 of them, wrapped them up in security bags and tape, and sent them home with Donald. He sent me home probably $2,000 worth of purses one time.
The statute of limitations has ran out.
Yeah, and he's dead, so I can tell these things. And and when he finally quit working there,
yeah,
he
and we'll tell that story too.
I was so upset with him. I said, I can't believe it, Jimmie. Now I'm not going to get any more free purses. What is wrong with you?
What did Donald do to John? What was the prank that Donald pulled on John?
John, do you remember Donald calling you with that voice board from Napoleon Dynamite that one day?
Please tell me the story again.
We were sitting in the den in the house, and Donald had a voice board from Napoleon Dynamite, and he called you. And then when you said hello or whatever, and Donald would push the voice that would say, "Do chickens have large talons?" And you're like, "What? What are you saying?" And he would punch something else that was on Napoleon, all them stupid sayings off Napoleon Dynamite. You talked to him for 15 minutes with that voice board, and you finally hung up on him. So Donald calls you back, and you're like, "Hello," because I guess you noticed it was the same number. And Donald says, "John, that was me, Donald." And you went, "Oh, Donald." You wait till I see you at work.
and Troy, just to piggyback a little bit on the Dillers thing, kind of going back on Jimmie a little bit. A lot of people don't. Jimmie had a lot of opportunities to make big money, and Jimmie would not let the kids down at Bensley. He chose Bensley and Meadowbrook over career. Oh, yeah. And the other thing, kind of a funny story about Jimmie, he had just came home from Ranger School, right? And I don't know, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid, I don't know, but he just came home, so he was Billy Bad, right? And my brother Tony had put a snapping turtle in a big oil drum outside our window. Okay? And this was in the summer. Yeah. And this was in the summertime, so you had your windows up. Well, the snapping turtle started scratching at the oil drum. Okay? Jimmie wakes me up and goes, "Hey, go outside and see what's making that noise." So, and I was like, "But you're the ranger." He said, "Yeah, well, I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you." But he's sitting me out there and closes the door until I investigated it. Man. So it was hilarious. Yeah.
So, John, you left Meadowbrook. You went to Virginia Tech. You played for Hall of Fame coaches and Frank Beamer and in, the lunch pail defense. What's his name? The defensive coordinator.
Bud Foster.
Yeah. Then you went to pro football and you played for, with the Texans. Coach
Kubiak with the Texans.
And then Coach Pete Carroll. Mm-hmm. And you worked for Mike Leach. I've given you pretty much your bio right there, but John, for people that don't know who John Graves is and where you come from, talk a little bit about Jimmie Rogers' role and who John Graves is today and the coach that you became.
Yeah. So I'm from Richmond, Virginia. Played my ball at Hopkins. I was actually supposed to go to Bensley. A lot of people don't really know that. I used to live out in Park Lee area. Man. So my dad,
Park Lee, baby. Yeah. Before it was nice. Before it was nice.
Well, you gotta explain to him it's not Park Lee no more. It's Winchester Green for the youngins.
Yes. We got people watching from all around the country, so Park Lee was not nice. I can show you a picture. Coach Bald, who is on Totem Pole, he lived in Park Lee. Now he lives in St. Petersburg. They knocked it down. They built nice apartments. They renamed it Winchester Green. But, man, John.
Yeah. So I was supposed to go to Bensley. Ended up moving out to Kings Forest and going to Hopkins. Fast forward a little bit. I actually met Coach Rogers during that time period, and he tried to recruit me to go to Bensley. And
he
was relentless.
John, you were hard not to notice. I mean, you were a man child. My brother, we saw you when you were in 7th grade playing for Hopkins, and my brother says, "Who is that kid that's got great fruits for calves?" He was like, "He is the one I want." This is when me and my brother were coaching at Byrd, and I mean, so it's hard to miss you, John.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing though. I mean, he was coming out. I mean, he was coming after me, but at the end of the day, he just wanted what was best for me too. Even at that point in time in my career, in my short career at that time. But fast forward a little bit, I played at Meadowbrook High School, and that's where I got an opportunity to actually interact with Coach Rogers a little bit more. Get a chance to get to know him and be a part of his life. And I can't say how thankful I am for that opportunity, because I mean, he demanded a lot from you, because he knew he could see a lot of things in you that sometimes you couldn't see in yourself. And that was very important for me and my growth, just seeing that. Like, you knew everything that he did from a place of love. And I know we're sharing stories about Coach Rogers, and one of the things that stick out even in my mind right now, even before games, he would eat glass just to show how much it meant to him. And he wanted you as an athlete, as a player, for it to mean that much to you. It wasn't because he liked to eat glass. He didn't do it because it was fun. I mean, when he was finished, I mean, he got to get cleaned up. I mean, his mouth was covered in blood. It looked like he'd been drinking red Kool-Aid. I mean, it was crazy.
Have you ever seen, from high school ball, to college ball to pro ball, have you ever seen another coach eat glass before a game?
No, and I don't think I ever will. It's honestly, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But I think that just shows you what it really means to him. And if you see that, and you see how you see him take that glass and he eats it, and then he talks to the team, it's something that lights a fire in you as an athlete to want to go out there and do well for him. I mean, he was special in getting and pulling things out of players that they didn't know they had. He was very special at doing that. And everything that he did was just so genuine. I'll never forget, this was around the time, this would have been probably 03, 04. Maybe it was our state championship year. He had purchased Under Armour, the whole Under Armour gear for the players with his own money. And at that time, and even now, Under Armour gear is expensive. But he didn't care. He did that because he wanted us to just feel as important as he viewed us. I mean, and that was so special. I'll never forget. I held on to that thing as long as possible. I played a lot of football, and I tell you, that thing was ripped, torn, all the above. But I will never forget. I held on to that thing as long as possible, because it meant something more to me than just a shirt.
Yeah, man.
It was something that it was when I would put that on, I felt like I was playing for him.
Yeah, so we just added, another one of my favorite players, Jonathan Wade.
Wade, what's up?
Yeah. So, Kenny.
Yeah.
You played for Jimmie at Bensley. What was that like? And you're a coach now, for OB Gates, and I think that the rec coaches sometimes don't understand their importance and how pivotal they are in the development of players and the development of a high school football program. So you've kind of followed in Jimmie's footsteps. Kenny, I've known you a long time, man. I mean, we could do a podcast just about me and you.
Yeah.
When do you first remember Jimmie Rogers?
Man, I was maybe just 6th grade, probably 11 years old, something like that. Jimmie come back around. Jimmie wasn't just our football coach, though, but Jimmie was our coach off the field. He was more of a coach off the field than he ever was on the field. Jimmie never really did the X's and O's guy. But like the Bensley area where John's talking about, like Park Lee's half mile from where I grew up. I grew up in Shady Hill Trailer Park. That's what you end up around there. You got a bunch of trailer park kids, single parent households.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of us looking for a male because the males that were in the life were there for a reason and it wasn't us. And so like Jimmie was that dude. So we, being a kid like that, you ask for that guy. Well, sometimes you gotta be careful what you ask for, because when you ask God for somebody, and those kids that have discipline problems, especially male problems, you get an airborne ranger. So you gotta be careful what you ask for. But that's what we needed. But Jimmie was he was a stern hand with a velvet glove to a bunch of kids who needed it.
Man. And like Jonathan, I don't know if you're on your laptop or your phone. I don't know what your connection's like, but if you're on your phone, like you got to have all your apps closed and like the laptop. I mean, because I think this program uses a lot of data. But I just got a message from somebody, and I don't know if this has ever been shown, but I'm gonna show it now. Y'all tell me if y'all can see this. Yeah. So that may or may not have been real glass. Some people tell me that it was actually some type of magic trick. But I've sat in many of a principal's office and had to explain that to them, and how he promised to never do it again.
Okay.
If you're in the on YouTube or Facebook and watch it, and you want to come into the podcast with us to celebrate Jimmie Rogers, just let me know. Hit me up on my text, hit somebody else up, and I'll send you a link, and you can come in here with us. So J-Hub, J-Hub's stepdad taught at Meadowbrook, Jackie. And this is what J-Hub says on Facebook. He says, the main reason I remember at practice with Rogers was our 2004 year. Dwayne Kelly fell asleep standing up, and Rogers found him and made him do up downs in the mud pit, which was a mud puddle.
That was the week of the state championship game.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. After that, he stayed with Kelly for about 5 minutes, just talking and embracing him. So he had a drill, and it would probably, get you in trouble today, but Jimmie didn't care. It was the mud puddle drill. And he was going to make your life a living, what, and make you wallow in the mud. Has anybody ever seen one of these drills that Jimmie has? He has one called the machine gun, which it was pretty effective.
The brick wall.
The brick wall. Would you like to explain the brick wall, Kenny?
I got a story with the brick wall.
Okay.
My sophomore year, we come in. Jimmie's the fullbacks coach for the wing T. So you got me, Tion, Trey, Dwayne Beck.
Yeah. Yeah, Trey's in here right now. I don't know how long Trey can stay.
All right, so Trey probably remember
Trey,
this.
like, dude, I know you.
What up, bro? Hey, Trey also my Bensley brother.
So
we not just Monarchs, we also Bensley Boys.
Trey, I don't know how long you could stay, man, but you were like a son to Jimmie. And like, we're just celebrating Jimmie right now. And anybody that wants to come on can come on. So, like, man, what's on your heart, man?
The crazy about this last, I was 3 days before he been on my mind a little rough lately. because that's the person I like talk to. Most people don't really know that even more than just a coach. He was like a father to a lot of us. You know, like I know Connor can speak on this because we ain't had no dad. You know, like Bensley Boys, and Park Lee Boys, we ain't had no fathers. We don't have single parent moms. And you know, Jimmie took us under his wing, and there's a lot of us that could have started to. This was a perfect example. I know you remember LJ. He went left, and look what happened to him. You know, so it's just been just to have somebody to talk to, just from that's gonna keep it honest with you and to let you know what you're really supposed to do. You know, he's just I ain't trying to call emotional on the thing, but
yeah, but you can, man, because you're talking from your heart.
I really do miss him, man. You just realize you don't really know what you have to home. Real for real. Just little conversations, little ups, the little stop bys. You know, like even hurt my daughter the most. My daughter's sick. She still asks what Coach Rogers at. Miss Coach Rogers, stuff like that. Like she's 6 years old. Like, she's you know what I'm saying? Like little stuff like that. So he just was more than a coach, more than a disciplined coach, more than a person that's gonna make you do up downs, you know, make you bear crawl, 100 yards. It was just more to it, man.
And Trey, like we did one on Coach McPhee, and it was me and Coach McPhee talking, and then we just did one on Gary Chilcote. And that's like these great coaches, these legends, these GOATs. It's like one, they change lives, they help get kids to the next level, whatever that is, and then they build champions for life. And Jimmie, you know, he had childhood dreams, but he found more, you know, worth in helping others to achieve their dreams. And
he didn't care who you could have been the best athlete on the team. You could have been the sorriest kid on the team. He didn't care. He treated everybody the same. Even, you know, we had kids that had disabilities when I was at Meadowbrook. And he still treated everybody the same. Even when we was at Bensley, we had a couple kids that had disabilities, never played. But you would still thought when Coach Rogers bought everybody chicken box, they had chicken box. He took that out of his money.
You were the best player he knew.
Right, like
everybody.
He didn't care who it was. You could be the fat lady boy, but he still care. He might talk to you, talk trash to you. He gonna be at your top, but at the end of the practice,
ain't no might.
He gonna make sure you got if you need food, he gonna make sure you straight regardless. So that's the thing.
He's the GOAT, man. I mean, he's my mentor. He's my role model. He saw something in me when I was just a young coach. He told me I was going to be head coach one day. So, Jonathan, I know you've done a lot of different things, man. You were a police officer. You've done real estate, business. You know, your mic is muted now. I know you'll probably unmute it. But, Jonathan, what did Coach Rogers mean to you, Jay? Jay Wade, can you hear me? I don't know if he can hear me. You know, Larry, Jay, yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, I ain't see you on.
Give me one. Give me.
What's up, Trey?
Hold on.
Yeah, Jonathan, your connection is really bad. Like I don't know if it's
yeah, my internet is being spotty right now. Okay, you can hear me?
We can. So yeah, just keep talking because I don't know if
can
it'll.
You hear me?
Yeah, the video may mess up, but we can hear your voice. Yes. So Larry, what was it like having a brother like Jimmie? You know, as he became a coach,
it might be
and you started seeing him have success, and you started, you know, seeing him change lives. And I mean, he like you said, lost out on jobs.
Can you hear me now, Coach?
He had a girlfriend that he had to give up because of his coaching. Like, what was that like?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Jimmie was the reason why I got into coaching baseball and basketball. Because I would come around, the Bensley kids, and you just fell in love with them, and I can remember the first baseball team. Jimmie was like, "Hey, I need you to coach the yearling baseball team." You probably remember that team, Troy. And I was like, they're great kids, and I go out there, and it was like the Bad News Bears. Half the kids didn't have gloves, and by the time the season was over with, I found myself buying cleats and gloves because that's what that was the example Jimmie set for me. I can remember coaching Trey and in basketball, and they'd be like, "Dude, you're definitely not your Coach Rogers," because Coach Rogers would be hooting and hollering at us. Right, Trey? Yep. And I just took the ball and went home. Okay, you guys ain't listening, I'm going home. But it was to be Coach Rogers' little brother was tough in a lot of ways because Jimmie was Mary knows this, Jimmie was a good football player at Meadowbrook. And a lot of people knew Jimmie as a football player, and when I got there, I'm 5'5.5", and everybody wanted me to play football, and I was like, nah, I don't have the same mentality, because Jimmie really was a dog, and that's why, and that's what made the connection, and Kenny and John and Trey all know this. That's what made the connection with the Bensley kids, because we were all dogs. We all had to fight, and I can remember Jimmie took me on a basketball court. Again, I was 10 years old, and he had his high school buddies and all that. They're in their 20s, and them guys would beat me down on the ground all day long. And when I would try to go to the bench, Jimmie would, where the hell are you going? You get back out, and I would get beat. But Jimmie instilled a thing to where by the time I was in high school, I thought I could guard a 6'8" guy. And I would want to guard a 6'8" guy because Jimmie instilled that in you. That you want the Hercules on the other team. You don't want the other guy. You want the guy.
Mary, I want you to talk a little bit about Jimmie Rogers. The student to Jimmie Rogers, who became the coach and eventually, was your son's coaches. Adam Gilbo, he just put in here, "What up, John?" My buddy Kyle Anderson, he loved Jimmie. He's the Chuck Norris of football.
Yeah.
I just want to say this to y'all is like, I had a coach that I talked to a few weeks ago, and he told me that he's had kids that have told him, "Oh, you don't look like me. You don't understand me." And I could never imagine a kid saying that to me or saying that to Jimmie, especially Jimmie. But like, why, y'all? Why, John? Like, Trey, like, why would a kid never say that to Jimmie?
He kicked their butt.
And have you ever had anything like that, John? I mean, what did you take from Jimmie that you took on, to coach it with? I mean, you've coached for some legendary coaches, but how did they compare to Jimmie Rogers?
Yeah, I mean, nobody can compare to Coach Rogers, man. Like you said, I've been fortunate. I've played a lot of football. I've been under a lot of coaches, and I tell you this: that no one has the profound impact that Coach Rogers has had on my life. Because like Trey said, too, I mean, it's more than football. It's more than football. He cared about you on a different level, and you knew that. It wasn't about what he made you do. It was the reason why you were doing it. You knew it was more like if you had to do up downs because you really messed up a lot of times. Sometimes with Coach Rogers, though, he might just mess with you. I'll never forget him rolling up in his truck, and we had started practice. We were probably about 15, 20 minutes into practice. And then all of a sudden you see his truck rolling on up. You hear that whistle. And then next thing you know, you hear, "I'm late, get him up." And then you got to get this guy.
Yeah, I mean.
But the funny thing, it's a great story, but the real reason behind that is the accountability behind it. Because even though he was late. He wanted everyone to understand that it was a team thing, and that he wasn't excluded. Even though we were the ones, he was part of that team. We were doing it for him. But to answer your question, though, nobody that I've been around has come close to what Coach Rogers has meant to me on a personal level, from a coaching standpoint. And when I coach athletes, a lot of my philosophy is based off of what Coach Rogers did. Build relationships. It starts at the foundation. Be relationable. Make sure that they know that that you care. But hold them accountable. Because holding accountable doesn't mean that you're always buddy. It means that, hey, if we set an expectation, we know we need to follow that expectation all the way through, no matter the circumstance. So a lot of his lessons stick with me today, and I try to instill a lot of those lessons on the players that I coach and will continue to coach in the future.
So, Mary, Jimmie Rogers the kid compared to Jimmie Rogers the man that had such an impact on all of us and your sons.
Well, Jimmie he was a tough little football player, and Larry talks about you're 5'5". I don't think Jimmie was about 5'5", 5'6".
Yeah, yep.
He had a heart. To play the game, but then Jimmie off the field was kind. You couldn't find anybody who did not like Jimmie, and Meadowbrook was we were a tight community when we were in high school. We lived around the school. Everything we did was about the school. Our keg parties were about which senior was going to go buy the keg after the game, and we will all go. And back then, the parents were there.
Yeah,
it's just a whole different mindset than it is now. And so our parents knew the kids. The kids knew we all knew each other. We all belonged to something outside of school that our parents would know or our parents would be at. So we were all a little tight community. So knowing Jimmie in school, he dated a good friend of mine for a while, and I knew him really good through that. I don't know if you remember Suzanne Wonders, Larry, or not.
She was a cheerleader.
She was the blonde. She was a gorgeous blonde.
Okay.
And,
was one of the.
I don't think that narrowed it down a lot.
Yeah. And he was just an all-around nice guy, and then he went away. He went to the military. And when he got back is when Jimmie and I was at Henning. I coached baseball, I coached football, and I was keeping score for basketball, and I was on the board at Henning. And he was at Bensley, and of course we'd meet up at games and stuff, and we'd start talking about kids and what we could do and what kids needed what and how we could raise the money doing it. And just through the years after that, every time we got together, we were talking about something we could do. And in the last couple of years before he died, he was in and out of the hospital a lot, and he wanted us to get together and start, because, Henning's failing, Hopkins is failing, Beulah's failing, Bensley's failing. Everything that feeds Meadowbrook now are failing associations. Mm-hmm. And he really wanted to see if we could get some of these associations going again. And we had talked about what we could do to get it started again, because I'd have been more than happy to head right back over to Henning and try to get something started back over there again. But the football programs are going. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I know you're looking at, elementary schools with 1,000+ kids in them, and they can't support a football program anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that. And that really bothered him. But, the other things, he always cared about my children. He was always asking, especially Donald and Jeffrey, who went in the military. So that really grabbed him, that, the boys were in the military. Yeah. And he always wanted to know how they were doing. And Donald's here now. He can tell you the story about the day he went out after 9/11 happened and the first practice back, and he saw Jimmie with his Rangers hat on. He knew they were pretty much screwed that day. And he'd have to tell you the story about that practice. Yeah. But, Jimmie was just an all-around good guy, and he always cared about the youth. And you talked to John about all the coaches he's been with. Well, he's had really good coaches, yeah. But there was one thing those coaches got that Jimmie never wanted, and that was pay. Jimmie wasn't worried about the money that he could get from his coaching. He was worried about how he could help the kids he was coaching, what he could do for them to make their life better. That was Jimmie.
And Josh Lynch, who played for us at Meadowbrook, and then Trey, I think he went over there and played at Byrd. I know he played at Byrd. I don't know if you were still on the team over there. He put Coach Rogers the GOAT, and that's true. He is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. Started my coaching career shortly after he passed away, and he'll always be in my heart as far as getting the best out of young men. And there's so many kids today, Trey and Kenny and John and Donald, and they put on their Instagrams and Twitter that they want to be a savage. And I have a philosophy that if you want to be a savage, you got to have a savage coach. And he was the most savage, but he also was the most loved. And I think sometimes people think that if you want to be tough or you want to be a savage, that you can't have a heart. Or I mean, he was special. He's one of a kind. So Donald, you followed in his footsteps after playing at Meadowbrook. And I got to tell everybody out there, I used to be an umpire. I started umpiring when I was 16 years old, and I used to
you did
all these
guys.
Me. Yeah, I mean, and I knew them when they were
still owe me
kids.
A home run.
Yeah, I messed that up, man. The ball hit off the top of the fence, and I called a ground rule double and took a home run away from Kenny Connor. I remember he had a bandana tied around his right calf. I didn't make him take the bandana off because I didn't care. And I mean, so this before you get going, Donald, talking about Jimmie, like I can remember the first day I met him. It was a game at it was at Enon, whatever they call Enon, Point of Rocks, and he was there, and he had a team, and it was an older team, Trey. And when I saw him, I didn't know exactly. Like I'm old school, so like when I look at you, like is he a white guy? Is he Hispanic? Because he was really, really like tan, and the way he talked, his dialect was so different. Like I guess it was because he was in Hawaii. I mean, he's from Jeff Davis, but I couldn't figure this guy out. And then I remember your team, Trey, that Dino played on. I saw a kid, his nephew Dino with Rogers on the back. So I just assumed that was his son, but it was his nephew. And we used to love doing Jimmie's games. And I remember he'd always come up to me and my brother who umpired, and he'd say, Mr. Taylor. And we're like, oh, man, he thought everybody hated him. But me and my brother loved him, and he was so surprised because he thought that we wouldn't like him, but he treated us with so much respect. So, Donald, speak on a little bit about that time period and then following in his footsteps, and you've been in combat. And then I'll probably let Trey talk a little bit about that because Trey was a heck of a baseball player too, man.
He's cool.
And basketball player.
Everything, man. He's all around, man. That guy's Ray Lewis, man. Ray Lewis can hold his jock, dude.
My biggest regret was going to Byrd. I'll never forget that. I wish I never would have left. If I could take back anything, I wish I can go back to my 11th grade year and go back to Meadowbrook. It's not, don't get me wrong, Byrd was a because I learned a lot of stuff from just more. Honestly, Byrd was more structured back then. So I learned a lot more stuff about football and just about being outside of football. But the biggest regret was me leaving Coach Rogers. It wasn't about Meadowbrook. It was Meadowbrook. It was Tion. I wish I never would have left Tion and Coach Rogers.
So Kenny, would Coach Rogers had bought Trey a LC Byrd letter jacket? he had never given him that letter jacket. So Kenny, would you like to tell America what did Coach Rogers do with that letter jacket that he had never given to Trey? What did he do?
Give that one.
Second game of the season, my senior year, and we won by. It was an 8-0 win, but like they couldn't get their offense going or anything like that. But when we come back, we had the jacket. We took it outside, hung it up on the fence out there by the field house on the basketball fence. Baseball fence. We threw some lighter fluid on it. We made a lighter to light it.
We burnt Trey's jacket. Man, what a motivator, man. We burnt. Adam Gilbo's on here. The biggest lesson I learned is the same voice in hand, he gave discipline. He was the same voice in hand he gave love with. Yeah.
Right about that, Gilbo.
Yeah. And Jay Hub says, beside football players, he always helped out mentally challenged kids also.
Thanks.
You know, I mean,
Andy.
Andy,
yep.
you know, lived next door to Jimmie, and he went to Byrd and used to talk so much trash about Byrd and Meadowbrook. And then Andy ended up coming over there to Meadowbrook with us, and he was our ball boy. And Andy passed away of leukemia, and he meant so much to me.
And you know, Troy, a story that a lot of people probably don't know. I know you know this. Andy was actually Jimmie's nephew.
Wow.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, us Brookers hated Byrd pretty bad, especially our age group, because Byrd opened the year we started at Meadowbrook. So they took some of our people that we had gone to school with and sent them to Byrd. So we've always hated Byrd. So any chance that I would have loved to have been there watching Byrd jacket burn.
Okay, so John, do you remember when Jimmie choked the dog for eating the hamburgers? Do you remember having a pool party at?
Can you refresh my memory?
We were having a pool party for all the guys that went to the weight room a certain amount of days, and we had it at Brew's house. And there was that little dog. He was like it wasn't the bulldog, but it was the
it was a small
Russell Terrier. But the Jack Russell Terrier got into the hamburger box that Jimmie had bought when we had our little pool party. You were probably 10th grade. You had your little floaties on because you couldn't swim. You remember Jimmie choking that little dog? Do you remember this?
I do remember that now. I do.
Okay. So what exactly happened there? But John, you work for a college. You got to be politically correct.
I remember getting ready to go out. What's that?
You have to be politically correct, man, because you work for a college.
So I remember. I just remember going out, about to get ready to hop in the pool, and I see Coach Rogers yelling at this dog, and at the time I didn't know why. And all of a sudden, I just hear a little yelp, and then I see
the dog had gone into the hamburger box and was eating the frozen hamburgers that Jimmie had bought, and he picked up the Jack Russell Terrier and he squeezed it, and it was like a cartoon. His eyeballs popped out. He took that dog and threw it. But man, he was a legend. Jay Wade, can you hear us, man?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Wow, man.
All right.
So cool, Jay Wade,
cool.
He went to Hampton, played for Coach Joe Taylor. I mean, you've been a police officer, you've done real estate, you've done a lot of different things. But what did Jimmie Rogers mean to you?
Coach Rogers meant, honestly, he meant the word. It was the first time in my life I had ever, besides you, Coach, ever met somebody who really cared more about me as a person than just a player. Like it was a different mindset, like a different makeup. Like it was knowing, and I think when I went to college, I really understood like it was the business of football and not necessarily, caring and loving for your players. And my mom worked at the VA. So, when she would tell me, I ran into Coach Rogers and when Coach Rogers was, going through what he was going through, my mom actually had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So at the same time, I'm trying to be there and care for her. We lost Coach Rogers at the same time. And she was just like, you got to go, you got to go to the service. You got to get. And I think one of my biggest regrets is not going, but I just emotionally couldn't do it, man. At the same time, and my mom passed 2 months later, and it's just like, it was just a lot. But Coach Rogers was one of those people that just cared so much about you as an individual. And every time I saw him, man, it was always love, and he hugged me. And I remember one time we were in the weight room, and Coach Bowles had one of his moments, and he went off on me in the weight room.
So what does that mean when Coach Bowles would have one of his moments? What does that exactly mean?
He just you can be like Coach Bowles will be talking to you, and then something will happen, and he'll just go slam off like.
We're gonna have one for Coach Bowles, y'all. We're gonna do one for Coach Bowles too.
Like poop fire without matches, but he didn't say poop, and he would just say that all the time. And so he went off on me, and at that time I was like, man, I'm just going home. So I just left and went home, and then I'm at the house. This was during summer workouts. I'm at the house, and Coach Taylor came to my house, like rung my doorbell at my house, and I was like, what is he doing here? So he told me, he's like, come back to practice. And the next day I came back to practice. I was like, man, they're gonna run me until until my legs fall off. And the first thing that happened was Coach Rogers just gave me a hug and was like he was like, you're a good kid, you're gonna be straight. And that just kind of solidified. And that was the year we won state championship. It was my sophomore year, and I just was like, man, and that was that the year he ate the glass?
He's eaten glass a lot.
It might have been a year.
One of the years.
Does anybody know a story about a snake?
Yeah, he definitely he ate some glass that year.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, me and Jimmie wanted a snake. Okay, so a snake to bite its head off.
Oh Lord.
So we went to the pet store on Midlothian Turnpike, in the nicer area of Midlothian Turnpike where we're not allowed to go. So we go into the pet store. It's me and him, and I'm 23 years old probably, and he asked the lady, ma'am, Jimmie is very, very, he has the best customer service. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we're here to buy a snake. And the lady goes, well, what kind of snake are y'all looking for? He goes, a snake so we can bite its head off.
Oh, God.
The lady goes, so you want to kill it? He goes, no, we just want to bite its head off. I mean, that's the type of coach he was that he would get a snake because, he was a ranger. And he told me they had a pet turkey and they would bite the pet turkey's head off and have to drink his blood. Mary, when Jimmie passed away, can you tell
he went to too many Ozzy concerts?
Yeah, he would eat light bulbs. It was all kinds of stuff. But when he passed away, I know you and Kenny and Curtis, y'all played a big role, and Meadowbrook High School would not allow Jimmie to have his service there. Talk a little bit about that. We're going to get back, but I just want you to talk about that.
I called the superintendent of schools and the school board, and I think I talked to every school board member. When I talked to Debbie Bailey, our Dale District, she assured me that his service would be at Meadowbrook. There was no way that it wouldn't be, and she made sure it happened. And she needs to be thanked for that. That whole school board needs to be thanked for that. Because if it wasn't for them, it wouldn't have happened. I'm not even going to get into that reasoning, but he deserved it. He was an alumni. He had put his time back into that school after he graduated, and he served our country, and he deserved to have his service there. And it just, threatening them wasn't going to do any good. You just had to get to the right people that they would ensure that it would happen. But when I talked to them, it was right off the bat. They had no hesitation so I don't know what they did after that and who they got a hold of at Meadowbrook to make sure it happened, but it happened. So
and
there's something else about Jimmie too that I'm listening to this talking. He never would let you know when there was something. Jimmie had health problems for a very long time. And he wouldn't tell you when anything was going on. And Dean played on Meadowbrook's baseball team. I can't remember, it was Jeffrey O'Donnell that played with Dino. But his mom would be there. And she would tell me, all of Jimmie's health problems and tell me when he had been in the hospital and blah, blah. I mean, and I could see Jimmie sitting up there watching me talk to his mom going, oh God, what the hell's going on over there? And afterwards I'd tell him, Jimmie, if you ever don't tell me again, when you're that bad off, I'm going to just finish it for you. And so we don't have to deal with this anymore. So he would call me finally to let me know when he was having issues, but he would never want anybody worrying about him. He would not like anybody knowing that he was having health issues. And he just, but when you would have them, when I was going through my surgeries, he would call me and make sure I was okay. And see, he came here. He brought me shirts from Meadowbrook. He did all, but he did not want you to do that in reverse. He did not want you to know that he was ill. He didn't want anybody worried about him. And he always was giving and never taking. He was a great guy.
So John, I muted your mic. When you want to talk again, you could unmute. It was a little bit of feedback coming from your mic, just to talk a little bit about, Jimmie and the last time I saw him alive. Me and Gerard Johnson and Shane Reynolds, my assistant coach, both of them are head coaches now. They're young. We went to UVA's practice, and I'd gone and seen him before, but after UVA's practice, we drove back and we were going to Byrd because that's where we met up. And I was about to go into Byrd, and Gerard was like, hey, we got to go see Coach Rogers. So we made a U-turn and we headed down towards the VA, in Iron Bridge and Broad Rock. And, I'd seen him one other time before that. I think I got to see him 3 times in the hospital before he passed away. And, the first time I saw him, me and him cried. And we told each other that we loved each other because we did. And, that second time, we laughed and we had fun and we talked to those young guys, and Jimmie loved those young coaches because he saw himself in them. But, he was such a special person. I mean, even the nurses in the hospital loved him. But man, John, working at Dillard's, what is your fondest memory? I need to tell the story why Jimmie stopped working at Dillard's and probably about some of his other jobs that he worked. Because I ain't got nothing to do, and I just want to talk about Jimmie. So, John, how did that work? You working at Dillard's, and Jonathan Wade, I believe you worked at Dillard's also. Kenny, I don't know if you worked at Dillard's. Huh?
I didn't work at Dillard's, but I did work for Jimmie.
You worked for him. Trey, did you work at Dillard's?
No, but I did the little like breaking leaves and doing all the other.
Yeah, for USA Mulch. So, John and Jay Wade, what was it like working at Dillard's there for Jimmie Rogers? Jimmie, for y'all that didn't know, he worked for Louis Vuitton in Hawaii once he got out of the Army. So he was well versed in customer service. And how mannerable he was. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. I mean, it was impeccable. So, John, talk a little bit about working there.
It's really crazy to see Coach Rogers, the coach, and then to see him and his working environment at Dillard's. Because, like you said, he had a silver tongue when it came to customer service. He could make anybody, no matter what type of day they're having, feel welcome and feel at home. And I picked up a lot of skills, not only from just watching him, but him teaching me on just customer service, communication, just being genuine to these type of people. So, very, very, very amazing there. But as far as stories for you, we were doing inventory one night, and it was me and Maurice Bassfield. For a lot of people who don't know, inventory in a department store, it's because everything has to be accounted for, and it's a ton of work. And so we have these scanners, and Coach Rogers had us. We were all in lady shoes, and we're going through scanning each shoe. And I'll never forget. So Coach Rogers has his scanner, and he's going through, and every time it beeps, it's basically counting a shoe. So he's going through beep, beep, and then on this third shoe, it just wouldn't beep. It just wouldn't beep, and you can hear it. It's starting out, the frustration starting small, and then out of where you hear, how are we supposed to win the war if our effing equipment doesn't work? And for us, me and Mo, we bust out laughing because not a lot of people around Dillard's got a chance to hear Coach Rogers in that type of atmosphere. But me and Mo knew, and there was so much truth to that, though. Like, it just showed that no matter what, he always wanted to make sure that, whether it's in football, whether it's in life, whether it's in his business outside of football, that, you need to be prepared. And he wanted to make sure that, in his own way, that Dillard's knew that they needed to be prepared for him when we're getting this inventory set up. So, yeah, that was a fun moment, a funny moment for me and Mo, and one that we enjoyed a lot.
Jay, did you work at Dillard's also?
Yeah, it was. He got me that was my first job ever. And I hated that job, but
why?
It was just because I worked in unlike the shoe department, I worked in like men's clothing, and nobody ever came over there. So it was like most of my days was just standing there. But I knew, like, I got off one day and I went home and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I don't know if I can do this. And then she was just like, well, who got you that job? And I was like, Coach Rogers. And she was like, I don't care if it was shoveling poop. If that man got you that job, you keep it.
Wow.
Because he went out of his way to make sure that you had a job. And it's crazy. And I'm trying not to, but it's just like him and my mom like kind of had like the same mindset, like that don't quit, that don't quit. We're gonna do what we're gonna do, and just the people that he connected me to through football, and connected me with Trey. He was like a brother, and we all grew, and everybody just grew up together, man. And it's just like this last year has just been rough, dog. Like I couldn't even, like I said, I couldn't even make it to see him because I just couldn't do it because I know how much he meant to me and what he meant to my family and what he meant to just me playing football. Like I never thought like football would have taken me to the places that it took me to, or introduced me to the people that it introduced me to. But we talking like, 20 almost 20 years later, and the same people that I love then, I love now. And it's all because of the camaraderie and understanding that you guys as coaches like instilled in us. And it just like it just that refuse to lose type of attitude. Like I tell my son all the time, refuse to lose, like on everything. Like we outside right now, he's trying to learn how to ride this dirt bike, and I'm like, refuse to lose, son. I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be hard, but it can't beat you. Like nothing can beat you if you put your hand in the dirt, dig in your feet a little bit, you'll make it. And that's just I thought we were just preparing for football, but it was preparing us for life it's like kids. And there's nothing else I can say like that can put into words like what he meant to me and what he meant to my family and what he meant to all of us. And it's just you just don't get people like that a lot. Like just in life, you don't you think like, oh, I live a blessed life. Like, no, I'm blessed to have met him and to have known him and to have him be a part of my life and just teach me what it's like to be an adult and teach me that, yeah, life is hard sometimes, but you keep fighting, you'll win. So
the great point you made was like when you were thinking about not playing and I came to your house and I didn't want you to quit. Jimmie responded in a way that you might not expected. And I think that is good because, with Jimmie, you never knew,
No.
what you were going to get. And sometimes he didn't even know. And it's just like myself, I can never promise you whether I'm going to be happy or I'm going to be sad or I'm going to be, about to blow up. But, whatever it is, it's genuine and it's from the heart. And, I have a coach that works for me now. His brother is the head coach at Midlow. He just resigned. But when he came to coach this year, people were telling him, you don't want to coach there. Troy Taylor, he's abusive to his players. He yells at his players. He cusses at his players. He's unsportsmanlike. And the guy, he's my strength coach. And you know who he is, John. It's a small world. Hutch. When they called me about Hutch, they said he went to Virginia Tech. So the first thing I did was call John. And John gave him a thumbs up. And if John Graves gives you the thumbs up, then I go with you. But the guy told me, he said, man, I've had so much fun being here at Byrd with you because it's so much like a family. And it is, because it is our family. Jimmie didn't have kids. He didn't have a wife. And, we were like his kids. I was like his little brother. I was like his son. He even said I was just like the son that he never had. And John, you were like that to me, before I had my own son. So, I mean, that's what's so special about coaching, man, is that we're changing lives. And Jimmie, I mean, it ain't nothing but the Lord, to bring me together with him, at the right time, and to be able to go over there and coach with him. Trey, I don't know if you remember this, but we had our drill through the blaster, and you had came out late for the team, and we really hadn't had a good collision yet because, John and Kenny, they had all the good players on the freshman team. But we had Trey and Zartucci and whoever the other 10th graders were. But Jimmie had that drill where a kid ran through the blaster. And once he ran through the blaster, there was somebody waiting on him. And you were waiting there, Trey. And you said, bam! And it was like a shotgun went off. And Coach Riley goes, no. That's helmet to helmet. And dude, I'd never even heard of helmet to helmet in 2001. I just thought that was the way that you played football. And I said, yes, that's the first football hit we've had yet. And then y'all remember, Jimmie, this is a good story. I think the statute of limitations has ran out. We had that little baseball player run through the blaster, and Jamal Zartucci was waiting on the other side. And he's about 6'3", 260 pounds. And as soon as that little baseball player went through that blaster, wham! Zartucci put him back into the blaster. And Coach Bowles called us over. And it was me. I was a first-year teacher, and Jim Riley. He had been there a few years, but he was young with a young family. And Coach Bowles came over there, and like Coach Bowles does, he calls us three. He goes, you three come over here. He goes,
oh, you got the finger.
He goes, you three effing guys are going to get fired. Jimmie goes, Coach, you're a first-year teacher. You can't get fired. Jim, you got a family. I'll take the fall. That's what he was going to take the fall for the drill. You remember that, Trey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. Because that was the first day me and Zartucci was kind of we was always friends, but we became more friends after that day. Because we both kept tripping off of that.
Tripping off of that? Yeah.
You were asking about him leaving Dillard's. I can tell you what he told me, why he left Dillard's.
Okay, go ahead.
I was singing him in a football game after whatever happened. And I walked up to him. For some reason, every time I went to Dillard's, I never paid more than $20 for my Sperry's. I don't know how that happened. Some little card Jimmie used every time I went to the register. Somehow the Sperry's were only $20. But I told Jimmie, I said, well, come in and give me some Sperry's. He goes, well, I'm not there. I said, what, with the purses and the Sperry's, I mean, what's going on now? You've hurt my hookup. He goes, well, my boss didn't like it too well when I ran him up the wall by his necktie. So I guess he got into it with his boss, and he physically accosted him.
Well, I think Larry knows the truth about this story, and it was I guess the statute of limitations has ran out, but his nephew and one of his friends, Brett Diamond, were doing inventory, and these were not official Dillard's employees doing inventory. So Jimmie paid them in merchandise, and he got the job done. He had to get it done. And the guy was wearing a tie. And Jimmie said he just took, when the guy approached him about it and accused him of, he said, stealing, Jimmie just grabbed his tie and just yanked it. And he said the guy's eyeballs popped out like that dog's, like a cartoon character. And that was it, you know.
And Jimmie probably said his most famous saying, "I'll rip your head off and stick it on a totem pole." I hear him say that so much to people. Yeah,
I'm gonna rip your eyeballs out.
Yeah, I know. I can't remember the guy's name, but I know exactly. And he's why I left. He's why I left. I knew that. I can't remember his name, but he was like this short, like this. He always wore like he always looked like he worked at a bank. Like he always wore a necktie and a dress shirt, never wore a jacket. And he just would always. He wouldn't tell you to do anything. Like he would just point, like tell you to, you know. And I was like, and at the time, like I had, you know, really hit the weight room and all this other stuff, and it was after prom, and I was in there. It was after senior prom, and I was in there working. Not my junior year, after my junior prom, and he said something to me, and I just was like, "Hey, look, man, I gotta go." So that was when I left. But I can completely understand why that might have happened.
Well, I hate to, but I've got to go, you guys. It's Donald's son's 5th birthday, and I got a party.
Is there any last story you would like to tell? Any physical altercations that he got into that you know of?
Yeah, there is one. It was after he went to Ranger School, and one of his friends, I think he was more Tony's friend than he was, but Charlie Hall, you know him, Larry, and they had gone to a bar, and Charlie said the guy was huge, started in on Jimmie, and Charlie said he's like scared because, you know, Jimmie little and this guy's big, and he thought Jimmie was going to get hurt, and he ended up outside, and Charlie said he went running out there to see what was going on. He said Jimmie had the guy down on the ground with his fingers on each side of his eyes, telling him if he didn't stop what he was doing, he was going to pop his eyeballs out of his head. That was back before he started. I think he was home on leave or something. He just finished Ranger School when that happened. But Jimmie didn't tell me about that. Charlie, he's my brother-in-law now. He told me about that one. So,
hey, Troy, I got a fight story pre-Ranger School.
Yeah, I've got to go. Bye, Larry. I'm going to miss your story. But
out of Meadowbrook?
Yeah.
Huh?
I got to go.
Kicked out of Meadowbrook.
This one actually happened right before Jimmie went to Ranger School. I think he just turned 18. And now, I remember this
record. I can't remember exactly what was his official knockout record. You know, in street fights.
Yeah, I know. I think he's up there with Floyd a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think he ever lost.
Yeah, but I remember coming home. I was playing in the neighborhood, and Jimmie was known to have a little bit of a hot temper, and something was going on at the house, and so Jimmie called the police, right? So the first cop shows up, and Jimmie starts mouthing off to the cop, and the cop kind of comes at Jimmie, and Jimmie tosses the cop around. Second cop pulls up, Jimmie tosses 2 cops around. Finally, there was probably about 5 Chesterfield police officers, and then one of them looked and said, "How old is he?" And my mom goes, "He's 18." Well, about that time, all 5 cops were on Jimmie, and for about 5 minutes, Jimmie was holding his own. And then finally, they just got him in an arm bar, and that was a wrap, you know. But you know, that was Jimmie.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, and for y'all that don't know, Jimmie was probably 5'4" or maybe 160 pounds at his heaviest. Josh Lynch, first time I met him, I got moved up to varsity. In my first practice, he was walking through and asked me, "Who the F am I?" I said, "Josh Lynch." They just moved me up from JV. He said, "We'll get him up for waiting 5 weeks to do it." Yeah, so Jimmie, get him up was the up downs. And that means you're going to be chopping in place, running in place, and hitting, bouncing off the ground like a Super Ball. So, you know, y'all don't know this, I would say. I know Larry probably does, but do y'all know why Jimmie got kicked out of Meadowbrook High School? Have y'all ever heard the story? Because I'm going to have to document it. It's going to have to be out there.
Yep.
Okay, so Larry, you can add or you can subtract whatever you want from this story. All right, I believe what grade was Jimmie in? His senior year?
Yeah, I believe it was a senior year.
Okay,
Yep.
Jimmie actually did not graduate from Meadowbrook High School. Okay, he actually was in his senior year, and he was in a study hall, and this was in the late 70s. Okay, so if you've ever seen Dazed and Confused, that was the time period. So he's in a class, and this is a story he tells, and this needs to be documented because this is history. They make movies about coaches like him and his life, so we're just documenting this for further use in the future. All right. His senior year of high school, he's in a study hall, and there's a guy in the study hall. He's got a line of something on a table, and he tells Jimmie, he goes, I bet you won't snort that. So Jimmie snorted this whole line. He didn't know what it was, but Larry, he claims it was angel dust. Do you know anything about this story? Okay, so after this guy, dude, this is the story. Okay, he didn't know what it was and what he was doing. Okay, but he did it. He said after he did it, he looks at a guy in the class, and he's got like a sucker in his mouth. So he looks at the guy, and I guess he thinks that the dude said something to him. So Jimmie goes over there. He grabs the sucker out of the guy's mouth, and he throws it right at the guy. And he said that the sucker goes, it smashed all over the guy's forehead. And then I believe that dude, he was eating from a straw for weeks. Okay.
And
Jim,
you know,
Larry,
Troy,
would you like to add? No one else knows this.
Yeah,
and people that were there. So Larry.
I want to say right after that, because Meadowbrook expelled him.
He
right?
punched. He went to the principal's office, and then he punched through the window. Yep. That was the front of Meadowbrook High School.
And at the time there was a private school called Gill. Private school, and Gill was kind of a pretty big deal around here at that time. You know, they were like what Benedictine and all them are. And when the Gill coach found out about it, they brought Jimmie over to Gill free of charge.
The next week, he's playing.
Yeah,
and
watching Jimmie play football, it was like watching Ray Lewis back in them days. You know, because Jimmie was just, I mean, he was rocking them private school guys all over the place.
Yeah, he scored 5 touchdowns. He said it was like playing Little League at Gill School. It was just so easy.
Yep. Jimmie's big regret was he used to always say he wished he would have done better school-wise, because Jimmie had big colleges looking at him when he was in high school. You know, he just, you know, and I think that's why he was so hard. Not maybe not hard as nothing, but I think Jimmie wanted that for players like John and Trey and all that, for them to get your education, do better than what, you know, because Jimmie, I think, saw the opportunity. Yeah. You know, and when you guys talk about how Jimmie did the whole accountable thing, well, you know, if you read up the Ranger Creed, you know, everything he was instilling in all those players that you guys coached with, Troy, was exactly what the Rangers would have taught them if they would have went to Ranger school. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I got to get off here and get back to work.
Okay, Trey. We love you, brother.
As my boss is McBride, so he won't be going.
Oh man, he's the best.
Yeah,
he's the best.
Man, I love y'all, man.
Love you too, man.
Love you, Trey.
If anybody else wants to come on, we got 7 people watching. If anybody else wants to come on, just hit us up and we'll send you the link. Anybody that's on here.
Hey, Troy, I got to cut out of here, but I appreciate everybody. I loved hearing the story.
I just want to make sure all these stories are documented, man. For the future.
Definitely. Yeah, but he loved all the Bensley and Meadowbrook kids.
Man,
that's what I'll leave it at. You know, he did love you guys. You guys. Thank you.
If y'all got any other stories, Kenny, you got anything, John?
Oh, Troy, we can do.
Well, dude, we're historians, all right, and we're documenting this for future. Yeah, for the future. They may be watching this in 1,000 years. You know, the legend of Jimmie Rogers. We want this to be documented. for maybe even alien life forms, if they come to Earth, they can see this, that there was actually, this is a coach that actually walked the earth. So would you like to tell them about any fights that may have occurred at Ecoff Park or anything?
I mean, there's the Ecoff one. Well, there were several. We were Bensley kids. There was always a fight somewhere.
So he was not afraid to fight.
No. Oh, by any means, no. One of my favorite stories is because when I got into coaching, my son started playing, my youngest, and coaching your kid is a lot more of a pain on both ends, for the kid and for the parent, because you always have them. And so I was talking to Jimmie, and I was like, "So, you got any advice?" He was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Be his biggest critic, because you're going to be." He said, "But you got to be his best cheerleader." And that's how Jimmie was with us. Like, he was our biggest critic in anything we did, and he'd humble you real quick. The brick wall drill, he did it with us. He was coaching the fullbacks, and we went through all our drills that he had set up for us. I mean, we went through it like we were a machine. And we went and got water, and we come back. So what do we do now? And he was like, "Well, Bo said we went through everything." And we're all like, bragging. He goes, hit the goal line. A brick wall drill is you start at the goal line, and he blows his whistle, and you start running. And then when he blows his whistle again, you stop running, and you start repping out push-ups until he blows his whistle, and then you start running again. And you do that. When you get to the other goal line, you come back to the other one. And you just keep doing. We asked him why we were doing it. We did all our drills, right? He said, "You're too good." We had to do the drill because we was too good.
Yeah.
He put helmets on with me and Trey. That's the story a Bensley kid can tell you.
That was what they did when he played. He said his coach used to suit up. I remember one time he got me to suit up against John. And I was lucky that John, I think, was only maybe a 9th grader, and I got to go head to head with John Graves. And I remember Coach Bowles, he put the helmet and shoulder pads on, and Coach Bowles called us over. And he called us over, and he goes, "You two," he goes, "you two are effing gonna get fired. You're gonna get sued. Somebody's gonna get hurt." I mean, he was so mad because. This was a long time ago. The statute of limitations is ran out and no one was injured. We would put the helmet and shoulder pads on, and wouldn't we, John? Yeah, I got to unmute you, John. Have you ever had coaches go full pads against you, or at least shells?
So, have I went full pads against what now? So,
have you ever had a coach go shells? Put a helmet and shoulder pads on, or either just put a helmet on. I mean, there's some great stories of Jimmie putting helmets on, and going and running. I mean, we're going to tell a story about Mike Traylor. But, John, have you ever had a coach padded up?
Besides going against you, I've never went against another coach in my career.
Yeah, dude, I mean, that was old school. Jimmie was old school. He is the original Coach Old School. Okay, so Jimmie would be known, even at Byrd, he would put a helmet on and take a kid on, dude, in a block, if he got fired up. But it was before we played Colonial Heights. Kenny, do you remember?
Yeah.
When Jimmie got so upset? Mike Traylor was long snapping, and Jimmie was on the other side of the field. And Jimmie just took off running full speed. I don't know if Mike had laughed at him or was joking around before the game, but Mike had snapped the ball and his head was through his legs. So, it's even illegal on any level now that when the long snapper lifts his head up, Jimmie's running full speed. Boom. And double form lifts Mike right before the game when we play Colonial Heights. And Mike goes flying. His head's the first thing that hits the ground. And I remember all the Colonial Heights fans, they were like, "What in the world is this?" I mean, Kenny, do you remember this?
Yeah, the backstory behind that is Bowles sat Mike that week. Mike had gotten hurt. Bowles sat Mike, and Tion didn't even play a lot that week against Colonial Heights because we were playing Colonial Heights, and Mike was out there being Mike, laughing, doing what he shouldn't have been doing. Yeah, Mike snapped the ball and looked up, and Coach Rogers was right there. I saw it coming the whole time. I was on the other side of the field. I was running wide receiver routes,
man,
and I could see his body language because I know Coach and I know Mike. You know, Mike was my best friend, so I'm sitting there watching him, and I'm like, that ain't good. And all of a sudden, I just see Coach start running. I'm like, oh, and yeah, he lit Mike up.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmie, come on. You want to come on, Jackson? This is my son. Come here. This is my son, Jackson Taylor. And Jimmie was like an uncle to him. Come on, sit down here. This is John Graves and Kenny. They're like my sons. Before my son. Kenny had to take 9 classes to pass 5 going into his senior year. Look, Kenny is a trailblazer. For anybody watching this podcast, he's the first kid in Chesterfield ever to take online classes. And he was an excellent student online, weren't you, Kenny?
Yeah.
And you were excellent. Tell everybody a little bit about your story. Because I remember when you were in 9th grade, you were in my class, and I saw you at Walmart, and you were pushing a baby stroller. And I told my mom, I said, that's his kid. And my mom goes, what? Tell everybody a little bit about your story, Kenny.
Well, at this point, I have enough kids that me and John, when we all get old, we'll have Social Security. Yeah, I had a kid. I had 3 kids while I was in high school.
You started early.
Yes.
Middle school.
Matter of fact, state championship year.
You had your 3rd one?
Yeah.
Your senior year.
When she was born that Monday that we played Byrd.
Wow.
I practice I missed all season.
Man, that's understandable, dude. That's an excuse practice.
Meadowbrook that Bowles gave me an excuse for missing the birth of my child.
So, John, how old are you now? How old are you, John?
I'm 35.
So you just had a baby. Could you imagine being an 8th grader and having a baby?
No, I couldn't, because she's crying right now. I'm about to have to tend to her right now, actually.
Yeah. So do what you gotta do, John, because I mean we might pretty much be doing a podcast, which one day will be a movie. All right, because we always said they make movies out of teams like this, and they make movies about coaches like Jimmie Rogers. So this is just the foundation for that. Because I mean Mike Traylor, I mean, heck, man, God rest his soul. I mean, we had so many characters on that team.
Oh,
I mean, Dwayne Kelly. We had a nose guard. What was he? 135-pound nose guard.
The play.
Yeah, Francis Barbarian.
That's Jimmie.
Francis Babrin wanted to quit. I had to go to the food line because he got upset because he had gone to the Philippines his junior year, and somebody made a comment, one of the coaches, and he wanted to quit. Now he's a dentist in Farmville, Virginia, and it's all because of Jimmie. What else, Kenny? We might as well just put it all out there, man.
Hey, Coach, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to get ready to go.
Yeah, do what you got to do, John. Me and Kenny will be on here if anybody else wants to come on. Thank you, my brother.
Yeah, love you guys.
Love you too, man. Forever, man. So if anybody's out there and they want to come on and talk about Jimmie, come on. Let us know. Me and Kenny's just going to be on here talking about Jimmie and talking about we got a comment right here. Let's see what we got in the comments. Here we go. Mike Wesley. Mike, you got to come on, man.
Sniper.
Yeah, you got him on Facebook. Send him the link, Kenny.
He's talking about Oliver. Sniper.
Huh?
He's talking about Brandon Oliver. Sniper.
Yeah, what? Tell the sniper a story, because I can't remember that.
That's just what we called him, because he could be at practice all day standing next to you. You never knew he was there. He never talked, but if you ever did talk to him, he was actually a very funny dude. But he's real quiet, and he always had his eyes going like this, watching everybody. He never, I mean, I think I talked more to Brandon after I stopped playing, after my senior year when he was a senior and I come back just to see everybody more than I did when we were teammates. But that was a nickname that Coach ended up giving him.
Yeah, Coach Rogers always gave people nicknames, and Mike Wesley, on Facebook, Mike, you need to hit Kenny up on Facebook and get the link so you can come on. But Andrew Fry, he was one of our guards on the state championship team and before. And, man, Coach Bowles used to give him a hard time, man, about remembering the plays. And Fry, I think, is out in California. He got 2 kids and a beautiful wife. And, man, Kenny.
Fry's the only person I know went from a lineman to a running back size in a season. He lost weight our senior year. He came in big and came out like he was smaller by the time we got to the state championship, like 30 pounds smaller.
Yeah. So the year that Jimmie, for y'all that don't know, Meadowbrook High School was the first high school in Chesterfield to win a state championship, and Jimmie was assistant coach on that team. And that was a special time because when Kenny was a freshman, that was my first year at Meadowbrook, and Jimmie, he had already coached there a year. He had came there coaching football the year before Kenny got to high school, and then he was coaching baseball the year before with Johnny Grubb, who had played for the Detroit Tigers and won the World Series and had gone to Meadowbrook and went to Florida State and played baseball. So, Kenny, just talk a little bit about that state championship year and what that was like, looking back at it all these years later, almost 20 years later.
That season started out, it was a lot of this, like, we knew who we was before we got to practice. Like, we didn't have to try out guys trying to compete. We pretty much knew where everybody was going to play because we were returning so many starters, and it was a group of guys. But there were some changes made with the coaching staff. Coach Mason came in as a line coach. You had been the previous line coach.
Do you know why that happened?
You went to quarterback.
Yeah, but do you know why I went to quarterbacks?
I'm guessing it's the latter.
Well, yeah, I interviewed for head coaching jobs at Monacan and at Atlee, and like everybody had told me, we just did a show about Coach Gary Chilcote this morning, and Coach Chilcote had told me, "Oh, Troy, they're not going to ask you any football questions." So, like, man, I went in an interview for Atlee. And John Trott was in there. He was the head coach of Henrico and Atlee, the original, coach at Atlee. And the first thing they said was, "This is a football-only interview. Get on the board." And I was like, I wasn't ready. Like, I knew the line play, but I wasn't ready to be head coach. Like, I wanted to be head coach by the time I was 25. And I didn't know the quarterbacks. I didn't know the passing game. So, Coach Bowles made me the quarterback coach, and he brought in Coach Mason. And Coach Joe Mason is still around today, and he came and helped us out this year at Byrd. So yeah, keep talking about the coaching changes.
And so that changed a lot with the O-line and us. And I was a tight end. I was probably one of the smallest tight ends still that you probably ever had. I'm 5'9", 195, and played in the program, but I wasn't that big. And the other move was Coach Rogers, who we all came up with. You're talking about guys who, like, Jimmie had only been at Meadowbrook 1 year before we all got there, and now we're all seniors. So we're the second class he started with as freshmen all the way up, and Bowles had moved him back down to the JV team, and it was like, why is he not up here? And I remember all of us, the senior captains and leaders. John was part of that, Bassfield.
Yeah.
Nathan Mumford, even though they were underclassmen, they were 3-year, 3-year starters of the varsity. So they were up there with us. I remember we all sitting there talking about you brought us all together. And we sent Chris in the bowls, and we brought bowls out. And we were like, we want Coach Rogers back. It's not the practice is missing something. And Bowles, that's when Bowles talked to us and everything like that. And he said, I understand that, but the JV team needs what he's going to install.
In Coach Bowles, I guess he knew that y'all were ready and that the JV program needed that discipline. And if we were going to continue that program after y'all graduated, that Jimmie was the right guy to send down there and, get those guys ready, for the next level. And, that program, we were really able to excel, for the next 10 years, really, because of that. So Coach Bowles saw the bigger picture, and that's leadership. He did what he thought was best for the team. But then, as soon as the JV season was over with, when he brought Jimmie back up,
going into the playoffs, and
it was like getting a shot of adrenaline. It was like boom, it was exactly what we needed. So you just keep going, Kenny, because you're bringing up stuff I forgot.
But he assured us. He said he will be there on Friday nights. He will be on the sidelines in his regular spot. You want to talk about? You never got in a fight with him, but remember the argument with the field hockey coach?
No, but go ahead.
Siddiqui.
Oh, he is a politician. I don't know if he could get me fired.
Oh no!
At this point, but yeah, go ahead. Sure.
It was something that it ended up. I guess being friendly would be a nice way to put it with one another. Later they would, but they got an argument. Because the field hockey players were talking to us.
Mm-hmm.
I may or may not have something to do with that.
Yeah. Can you believe that teenage boys were talking to teenage girls, and then Jimmie got into it with the male field hockey coach,
the field hockey coach,
who may or may not have worked for the state government.
Actually, comical.
Yeah, and he runs his own nonprofit. Yeah, he's got a lot of money. He worked for the governor, dude. I could tell you another story. There was a volleyball coach when Jimmie was coaching there with me at Meadowbrook, and the volleyball coach might have been kidding around, but we were in the gym, and the volleyball coach said something about people pay to come see the volleyball team. They don't care about football. And it was, we didn't talk a lot about Andy, but I'm glad that Larry said that Andy was Jimmie's nephew, and Jimmie never told anybody that. And Andy had Down syndrome, and Andy got leukemia, and Andy had just passed away, and Jimmie came to practice, and the volleyball coach who had said something to him came into the coach's office, and it may or may not have happened where Jimmie had that guy in a corner. I guess the guy, he needed a massaging around the neck.
Oh yeah,
he's trying to help him out. So yeah. So if there's anybody out there that wants to come on, J Hub was out there listening. If J Hub wants to come on, let me know. But Kenny, me and you've always been so tight, man. And Jimmie, you felt the same way about Jimmie. But I can just remember you taking those classes, man, to get eligible, to play your senior year. And some kids wouldn't have done it, but that just showed how much you really love football, and, you wanted to play, and you did it. What else is there about Jimmie, other than what we've talked about so far? Anything else you can think of?
You brought up earlier when everybody was on it, Jimmie actually had no kids of his own. And I remember that me and Curtis were outside the locker room. And this was years later. I mean, our sons were probably 4, maybe 5 years old, maybe 6. Yeah, I think they might have been playing at Gates. No, well, no, yeah, they were young. And it was after a Friday night game at Meadowbrook or whatever. And we're all standing outside, and I remember Coach Rogers saying that one of the things he kind of regretted a little bit was that he didn't have none of his own. And I think it was the only time I ever really gave Coach Rogers a Coach Rogers voice. And I was like, the hell you mean? And he said, what do you mean? I said, Coach, you may not have had fathered any kids, but you're the closest thing to a dad hundreds of us from ever had.
Yeah.
You have more than one kid. You have 100 kids. I mean, when we were in Little League, man, he pulled up to a game, and that little ass
minivan.
His truck.
The minivan.
No, this was before the minivan. He had the truck. He had the Ford Ranger with the cap on the back. He'd stop at the game, and you'd see 7 kids get out that thing.
Yeah. Just to tell you about that, me and my brother, we used to umpire. There's people probably watching that don't know this or are out of state, but we used to umpire Jimmie's teams, and we'd have Bensley. And a lot of times before Jimmie got to Bensley, we know we could get a forfeit. And if you got a forfeit, you got paid for not working. So, we have Bensley, and we'd be maybe down there about 10 minutes before the game, and there wouldn't be a team. And we think, oh, we're going to get a forfeit. And then all of a sudden you see one kid run down. And then here comes the rest of the 9 kids. And they have Jimmie's team has custom, embroidered, Major League Baseball uniforms. And this is for Bensley Elementary that's on Jeff Davis and the lowest socioeconomic level in Chesterfield County. But they have the best uniforms, and they're disciplined. And they're little soldiers. So his team is entirely African-American kids. They're probably I think the team I remember was a Bronco team. So I believe they were maybe 10 years old. And Howard was on that team, and his nephew was on that team, Dino. And Dino, works for the state police now. But they all had their embroidered last names on there. And I think you were younger than them, Kenny. But
years older than them. Howard Spencer than them.
Oh, you were older than them. Okay, so
Rodney was Rodney Nichols.
Yeah, I mean, and his team was so disciplined, and they were soldiers, and they played small ball, they bunted, they got the bat on the ball, they stole nonstop, and we got to talk about Jimmie getting kicked out of CQL, man, because that was big. But the coaches hated Jimmie. And then Jimmie, he said at one time he may or not have, found one of his players stealing another team's bat. And the other teams would say, hide your bats, Bensley's here. And, Jimmie, he paid for all of that out of his own money.
Yeah.
And when he brought Bensley basketball back about 10 years ago or 7 years ago, 8 years ago, he paid for all of that out of his own money. So the story about Jimmie getting kicked out of CQL, Chesterfield Quarterback League Rec Association football. Kenny, are you aware of this? Do you remember the team?
I was on the team.
Okay, so you were on the team. So from a player perspective, tell the story about Jimmie Rogers getting kicked out of Chesterfield Quarterback League as a coach. He was banned for life. Do you remember? And I know from what Jimmie told me, a coach's perspective.
The plays were illegal. They were too old. Is what we had. It's basically what it was. We played one regular season game with those guys on the team. We had 5 possessions in the first half and had 5 touchdowns. We probably 6 offensive plays. They probably had negative yardage on offense. It wasn't even. But we had a few illegal players that got Jimmie gone.
So this was the story that Jimmie told me. All right, like Jimmie, for the young coaches out there watching, Jimmie was a big believer in et brute, which is, from the play written by William Shakespeare about Julius Caesar, and it pretty much means you too, Brutus. So if you're the head coach, there's always somebody that wants to take your job. So Jimmie always told me, et brute, Troy, et brute, watch your back. And he said that there was a guy, his name's Bill Ham.
Yep, Coach Ham.
No disrespect to Bill Ham at all, or I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just telling you what I was told. Coach Ham came to Jimmie and said that he had some players, and Jimmie was happy that he had some players. So Coach Ham told Jimmie that all the paperwork was good. Well, from what CQL accused them of, that Coach Ham had taken the birth certificates and whited out, the year that they were born, and I guess used a typewriter or whatever and changed it. But the story Jimmie tells is that this one kid on y'all's team, who may or may not have drove to the game, he said he was like Deion Sanders. He said when the kid touched the ball, he said it was magical. I mean, it was like a touchdown on offense, a touchdown on defense, and he got banned from Chesterfield Quarterback League, and that's why he actually went to Meadowbrook to coach. So, man, I mean, what a legend, dude! What a legend.
I can probably believe that something like that, because we had technically an illegal player even after that happened. He lived off 9 Mile.
9 Mile. Man. So, like, Jimmie, I guess, I mean, he was the most hated, but he was the most loved. And, I put it on the internet. He was the most savage coach of all time, but he was also the most loved. And talk a little bit about, his service and the people that talked, Kenny, and us going in that locker room, with all those people, all those players, all of our guys that played for Jimmie.
Like I said, Coach Rogers wasn't, the whole time I remember him coaching or being around, he wasn't an X and O guy. Like, he never got into the strategy or anything like that.
It wasn't important to him.
That was somebody else's job. But one thing his job is if you messed up, you knew you messed up. And like I said earlier, he had a stone hand when it came to discipline. From a brick wall to what Bowles call it, Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
Yeah.
Go over there. And but at the same time, he did it with a velvet hand, a velvet glove, where
yeah, Josh, if you want to come on, hit Kenny up on Facebook, and he'll send you the link. And you can come on, man, and let's talk about Coach Rogers. We'll probably be on here for about 15, 20 more minutes or so. We just want to document all this, y'all. This is history. I was Kenny's history teacher, and Kenny, we learned prehistory all the way up to the Renaissance, and I've been teaching this class for 23 years. And can you believe it's never changed? The subject has never changed. The prehistory, old Stone Age, new Stone Age is still the same. I mean, it's the greatest class ever, man, to teach. And Josh Lynch says, it was never about football.
No, football was always second.
It was about life. It was about overcoming adversity. I mean, there's a Vimeo video that Randy West made that was made at a time when Jimmie was sick, and he thought he was going to pass away. And it was pretty much like his last will and testament. He talked about the love that we had for our players and the love that we had for each other. And the reason he was so hard on his players was because he was preparing them. Because of his time in the military. He was in the Army Rangers. He was in there in the early 80s after Vietnam. So there were some really hard Vietnam guys that were still in there. And, he tells a story, Kenny, about when he was in the Army Rangers. He was in Washington in Ranger School, and some of the Vietnam vets, they used to throw out candy, like Snickers bars, opened up out of the helicopters. So they'd just be laying there on the ground while the Rangers are out there starving. And he said he saw a Snickers bar and it was just covered in ants. And he said that was the best Snickers bar he ever eaten in his whole life. Jimmie wasn't afraid to eat anything, man. He just wiped the ants off and ate that junk. So, like David Goggins talks about being hard, and Coach Rogers was hard. He was the hardest of the hard, but he had a heart. And, he loved people, and that's why his legacy will always live on. Your job coaching youth football, Kenny, you've been doing that for a long time. Have you seen the same, like, I guess maybe if you've been doing it long enough, but have you gotten that same feeling that Jimmie got out of it?
Yeah, this year was the first year where I actually had kids that started when they were like 5, 6 years old, and they're freshmen. They're freshmen now, and a lot of them go down. We feed into Matoka, most of them, and one of the best things I got was for guys that I know there to be like, "You coach that kid, you coach that," because if you were coached by Coach Rogers, people who know it can point it out, and that was one of the best feelings. I still have it come up to me, and one of the best things in the world. Remember, I coached 1 year with you at Meadowbrook, your last year,
mm-hmm.
And I still run into guys from that team. That, hey, coach, and you turn around, you're like, whoa, hey. And I didn't know a lot of those kids that well. I was only there with you the 1 year. And but my coaching shirt this year, I don't know if you saw it. Every year I make our coaching shirts. And it's normally a T-shirt with the logo, not the traditional coaching shirts, but I normally put some on the back. Like I've had We All We Got at a team I coached. Only had 11 kids on the roster. And that was our theme, was We All We Got.
Yeah.
This year on the back of it, first person I ever heard say it was you, and it makes more sense as coaching is my ministry.
Yeah, it is,
and it's big. I really believe that because, like when it came to Coach Rogers, Trey was on earlier. He could vouch, and a lot of the Bensley Boys. We didn't have that at home. We didn't have a male discipline figure at home. And if we did, it probably wasn't that good. Jimmie was that guy, not just our coach, but he was able to help keep a lot of us turned out better as men, people, fathers, brothers, sisters, whatever, because of him.
Yeah. He changed my life.
Yeah.
Forever, man. It's like the greatest motivators are people who see something in you that you don't even see in yourself, or see a gift, or are able to acknowledge a gift. Like, I was able to acknowledge your football IQ when you were young. And I've had people in my life that have told me things like, Troy, you're a great storyteller, or Troy, you're going to be a coach. And, man, Jimmie, man, like he told me exactly what my future was going to be. And he told me he told me where my whole life was going to go. He told me I was going to be head coach at Meadowbrook. He told me I'd be the head coach at Byrd. He's told me other things, and it all panned out, man. And it's just people like him are special, man. And they changed the world, man. Kenny, I'm going to say this, man. I don't know what else we want to talk about, but, Maya Angelou was a poet, and one of her poems is called "I am a human being, therefore nothing human is alien to me." And what it means is pretty much that if a human being is able to do something bad, I've had some players, they made some mistakes and done some things and gotten in trouble. And if that player, if he's able to do that, then I also, because I'm human, I'm able to do it. But the harder thing to believe in the whole thing about I'm a human being, therefore nothing human is alien to me, is that there's been some great humans, man, that have walked this planet. And in the poem, she says, like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa. And if those people can walk on the earth, then why can't you be one of them?
Yeah.
And Jimmie was. And he's a human being in all facets of the word, because he was not perfect, and he had his issues. I mean, the guy could snap at any time, but he had a heart of gold. And what's that old saying goes, man? It's like everybody's got a little bit of good in them. And I try. I guess that's having a positive mental attitude, Kenny. That you see the good in people. And Jimmie did.
Well, he definitely could bring out what you were best at. And like I said earlier, he made you feel like you were the best player he knew.
Man.
And especially if you wasn't. Like, if you wasn't as good as you thought you won't an athlete. You won't supposed to be out there. You thought you could play.
Yeah. I mean, Bear Bryant said there's probably a better coach for the superstars. There's probably a better coach for 5-star guys, but there ain't no better coach for a guy that you can get the most out of, that wants to be good, that thinks he's good, that wants to be coached. Not a guy who already thinks he's arrived when he's a freshman or he's already peaked out, but there's coaches that can get the most out of their players. And Jimmie was a guy where he could take somebody with a lot of want to and a little talent and beat somebody else's team that had a lot of talent and not much want to. But that was just Jimmie. And man, I'm glad we did this, because it'll be out there forever. The good and the bad and everything in between. Kenny, you probably know me better than most people.
Yeah.
And Shane told me, he's like, Troy, I don't know if you should do this podcast. He's like, because you might talk too much about like what I believe in football and life, and I might be giving out too much information, but we're documenting this, man, and it'll be forever that it'll be up and people can watch it and learn about Jimmie Rogers and the impact he had, and maybe even motivate another coach to do the same.
He most definitely was. The football is easy. Football really is easy. It's really just blocking and tackling. That's all football is. But it's the other things that he taught. The accountability, being a man, being responsible for others. That believing more in yourself. And you didn't want to be a Rogers star kid. You really didn't want that. Everybody's seen the niceness of being a Rogers star kid. Your expectation level was held higher.
Yeah. The better you were, the harder he was going to be on you.
Morgan
Moses, John Graves. I mean, they got it the worst, man.
Yeah. And he had a very easy way of humbling you.
Yeah. So anything else you want to say before we sign off, man?
I loved him. He was one of the best men I know. I'm trying to model myself in ways of him. And he's probably the top influencer coach I've ever had. just because of the off the field. He got me to trust you, which was a positive outlook for my future.
And why is that? Because I had a coach ask me. He said, a kid tells him, why, I don't. Why are you trying to change me? I can't relate to you. And then like this morning, Puka, who was a longtime coach at Glen Lee and assistant at Highland Springs now, Coach Chilcote had told him once. He said, "That's why I need you, Puka, because you can help me, relate or get a kid to relate to me." So it's almost the same thing that you're telling me that Puka said this morning. How's that? How did Jimmie do that?
Well, this is one of those things. If Coach Rogers signs off, whether you agree with it or not, you're gonna at least, all right, then I guess we're going this way. And we were just, I was a knucklehead, so I'm hard headed, and growing up the way we grew up, males want somebody that we trusted at all. So, so a new male, I had to learn to trust other people, and it needed someone like him to sign off on it, because we knew no matter what, if any decision he made was in our best interest.
Yeah.
Not his. And you robbed me of my home runs, so I didn't like you.
Man, I made a mistake on that, dude. I don't even know why I was thinking, like, because I'm a common sense umpire and I'm a common sense official. Like, I don't know if I was thinking that the wall was a part of the ground. Like, what made me think that if it hit off the top of the fence that it was a ground rule double? Was I thinking like there was some type of stipulation? But I remember I told you, I think even after you hit it,
looking at you with my arms crossed, wondering why am I standing on second?
Yeah. And I can't remember. Did I even admit that I was wrong? That I messed up? I don't even.
Yeah, about 5 years later or so.
Dude, I think I knew I was wrong as soon as it happened, man. I mean, I was like, I know my brother wasn't umpiring with me. There's no way. I must have been without him, because he would have gotten that right, dude. But I don't think we ever did an umpire together. When we were umpiring. I mean, dude, I've been so blessed, man. I mean, to be able to umpire. I mean, I never really worked a real job, man. I've umpired, I've coached football. And to start umpiring and meeting Jimmie and meeting all the y'all, and then just going right into Meadowbrook, and then being able to go to college football, come back to Byrd, and now we're coaching guys, kids who we coach them, and I mean, it's just a blessing, man. It's such a blessing, man. I mean, but I mean, golly, can you believe there's actually 6 people watching us right now? Can you believe people get paid to do this? They ain't lived half the life that we've lived. They ain't had half as much fun as us either, man.
I probably had more fun for enough 3 or 4 people.
Yeah, buddy. Hey, Kenny, you have to come back on, man. When I have another guest, you be a co-host.
I will.
Because, dude, nobody knows more football than you, man.
I try.
Yeah, don't. I mean, it's just natural for you, man. It's easy. It's easy, man. But I love you, man. We love Jimmie. We're like family, brother. Sure. So I appreciate everybody watching, and we're going to do more of these. And thank you.
Thank you, Coach.
See you, brother.